Hi, Litherus. This is Lauren Zurchin, your book managing editor, and I am here with author Melissa Gray, and we are here to talk about this book. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Just so you know, guys, we just tried to get on Google Chats for like 45 minutes, so if I'm looking a bit frazzled, that's why, because we were both ready to like throw our computers out the window. But we're here, we're excited. I'm grabbing my notes here. I'm so excited to talk about this book. So I got this book in the mail from Random House, and they send me a lot of advanced copies of things. And when I read it, I was like, when I read the blurb, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds like it has all the elements of a story that I'm obsessed with. And when I read it in one sitting, and I was absolutely right. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm not just saying that. I love, oh my gosh, it was so good. Guys, this book was so good. Okay, so before I start gushing about things that nobody has any idea about, explain the story for those who maybe are listening and are curious about what it's about and maybe haven't read it.
Sorry, did you ask me to do that? Because you broke up halfway through the question.
Okay. Yes,
it's
okay. Do that for me.
Okay, so The Girl at Midnight is about this girl named Echo who runs away from home and is taken in by this magical race of creatures who live beneath the streets of New York called the Avacyn. And they have feathers for hair and they're magical. And they're also at war with this race called the Dracarin, who believe they were descended from dragons. They have like scales, but not like gross scales, like sexy scales, you know, sexy fish scales. The way some people like have freckles, you know. So Echo finds out that there's this thing called the Firebird that's prophesied to end the conflict. It's a really big deal. And there is magic and murder and mayhem, and it's like a really high stakes global scavenger hunt.
Yes, the quest story, the scavenger hunt element, that is probably my favorite thing in stories in general. Is I love the story unfolding and the backstory unfolding as the characters are doing the A to B. And that was one of my favorite things about this, is because they were kind of getting to know each other. So basically what happens in this book, guys, and we are going to talk a little spoilery, so if you haven't read it and you want to be surprised, then go away, read it, and come back and listen. But basically the two main characters form an uneasy alliance to try to, ultimately they're after the same thing, even though they're technically not friends, they end up becoming more than friends. But it's meant to kind of be something bigger than everybody else, which I really thought was really cool, because the story is about peace and about not just these different races, but just sort of finding this thing that supposedly can make everyone get along. So talk to us a little bit about kind of creating the magic system in this world, because it's really was interesting how it kind of evolved, because you have these characters that aren't human, even though there are humans in this world. They're under New York, and they travel around the world, but then you have this whole other element with magic that happens. It's really interesting how you kind of created those two different levels. Can you kind of talk to us about your thought processes with that?
So I wasn't interested in creating like a second world fantasy for this, like a Westeros or a Middle Earth. Like I wanted it to feel like something that you yourself could encounter, like kind of how in Harry Potter, like maybe if you just find platform 9 3/4 and run through the wall, then, into this magical world. So I wanted it to feel real before anything else. And I wanted it to feel accessible and have an internal logic to it. So Echo is human, and she's really the only human that you encounter in this story. And she uses magic sometimes, but it takes a bigger toll on her. Like every time she uses it, she gets this splitting migraine because she's not her creature. So in my system of magic, everything comes with its price. A magical creature like an Avacyn or a Dracarin, then it comes more naturally to you than it does to Echo, who's a human. So that's always been one thing that set her apart. And I was interested in using the system of magic to really drive home how Echo feels like she doesn't belong, how she feels like she's other. in the society that she's grown up in since she was, 7 years old.
Yeah, that was really interesting too, because it's like, even though her best friends are Avacyn and she's, they accept her, and her boyfriend is awesome too. It's you're right. It's like the whole time she's kind of, there's always that kind of hanging over her head of you don't really belong here. Why are you here? And there's and that kind of thing. So you're right. It was really interesting. I really liked how you had the simple things too, of like the shadow dust, where they could just kind of step into travel. It was just really neat how you kind of mixed reality and fantasy together. I really liked the blend a lot. I thought it was really neat. One of the other things I really loved is, so you have the main character story. So guys, the main character is between the human and the main dragon prince guy, and he's got a crazy sister who wants to basically take over the world and basically destroy all things good in a way. And I mean, she's basically trying to, in her own way, do her own, how she sees things to be right. But I love that the side characters have incredibly rich stories going on. We have some interesting romances. We have this like love-hate relationship between Echo's best friend and the captain of the guard, who's sort of in love with Caius but isn't, but then sort of, it's really fascinating.
He's been in love with Caius for like 100 years. He's carrying the torch.
Yeah, a pretty heavily burning one, even though, and it's like, I love how he pretends like nobody knows, but everybody knows. It's kind of amazing.
It's the elephant in the room for poor Dorian.
Oh, but it's wonderful. And so what happens in the story, for those of you who maybe haven't read it, is the best friend, Echo's best friend, she gets arrested and thrown in this dragon prison, basically, and is essentially beat up by the captain of the guard, who is in his heart a good person. He's a good soul, but he does this and he regrets it, and it has to do with his own demons from the past.
He hits her. Yeah,
like he it's a physical thing, and it really, and you're able to see that kind of plays out because they're forced to kind of be around each other later in the story, and how they kind of evolve that. Was that, I mean, when you were developing the story, because there's so many levels, I'm really curious to see how you decided to add in those other plots, because that relationship, for example, I loved that development, but it obviously isn't like the crucial element to the story moving forward. It was just kind of adding richness to the characters. How did you kind of come up with, I mean, I don't like to say, where did you come up with your ideas? I don't want to mean that, but like, how did you decide to kind of develop those side stories and flesh it out a little bit?
I think when approaching, a lot of people ask me how I deal with having 7 point of view characters in this book, and they're like, does it ever feel confusing to you? And that's writing a book is really hard, but that was the one thing that I always felt secure in, because the way I approached it wasn't in seeing them as side characters or seeing like the events that happen in their sort of something there to add color to the main story. Like for me, there was no main story. Every single character thinks they're the main story. So, for example, when Dorian and Ivy have their confrontation, she is in a very different position than he is. She's chained up, she's in a cell, and he comes in with good intentions. He says, if you just give us the information we want, then we'll leave you alone. You're not a soldier in this battle. I'm not interested in hurting you for funsies. And she, so minor spoiler, Dorian has one eye. About many moons ago. And Ivy asks him, so how'd you lose that? And he said, oh, it's this guy Altair, who is an Avacyn general. And Ivy knows Altair, and she knows Altair's a giant dick.
Yeah, he's a real.
And
it's rarely well written.
she's scared, and she's been hurt, not by Dorian. She was interrogated by Tanith, who was Caius' crazy sister, who was a very violent person. But she's not in a good place, and she wants to make someone else hurt as she's been hurting. So she can't hit anyone or physically hurt anyone. So she just says to Dorian, oh, good, I hope Altair kept the eye. I hear he loves a good trophy. And that's like the missing eye, and like Dorian has all this scar tissue on his face because it wasn't like neatly gouged out with a little spoon. Like it was a really violent, like tearing.
Yeah.
And so his face is all scarred up, and he's very insecure about that. So she hits him in the place that it hurts him the most, and he just kind of goes, boop. And he leaves the room, and like he's immediately disgusted with himself, and he's nauseated. And it's not, you know, you sort of see the differences between who he is as a person and who Tanith is as a person. Tanith doesn't give half of a crap if she hurts an Avacyn. She doesn't see them as people. And Dorian has all his prejudices. He's been at war with these people. And, you know, if there's one thing a culture of war teaches you, it's how to dehumanize the other side. So that's something that Dorian's struggling with. But for him, he hits this girl who's not a soldier. She's 17 years old. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he realizes that that's not the kind of person that he wants to be, despite what he's been raised to believe about the Avacyn and his role in this whole war.
And I'm sure that's probably why, a part of why he's held that torch for Caius too, because I'm sure it hasn't always been that way, but that's his soul as well. That's essentially the journey we're going on with these characters. And so, you know, I just really loved that, because that scene in particular where they kind of have that encounter, Ivy and Darian, I just really like how they both go against their nature, and it's because of the situation they're being forced into.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that you did brilliantly is you basically forced everybody together and made them have to deal with each other. About halfway through the book, 3/4 of the way through the book, their characters are on the run and they need to go into hiding, so they go into hiding with a frenemy of Echoes. I don't know what else to call him. The wonderful Jasper, who's just fantastic. And so they're all stuck there, you know, and Dorian's hurt. Ivy is actually trained as a healer, and so she now has to try to heal him, but she kind of hates the guy, and he feels guilt. It's so wonderfully done. I love that. I mean, were you just at that point, like in Glee, like, okay, I'm going to just make them all.
Yeah. One of my favorite tropes in fiction is like the trapped in an elevator trope, like where you just have these people and you trap them in a small room and they just have to deal with each other and deal with like not being able to escape. So they can't leave because they're safe, they're on the run, and none of them really like each other that much. I mean, Dorian and Caius are best friends. It's just this, you know, scoundrel who happens to have a free apartment, who doesn't really trust anyone, and no one really trusts him. So that was a really fascinating dynamic for me to write. I had a lot of fun writing those scenes.
So for those of you watching this, I just met Melissa face to face today, but I was reading this book. She had already signed up to do the Litherus book club with us, and I'm barely into this book, and Echo has this like Avacyn boyfriend named Rowan, I believe, right? Is that his name, Rowan?
Rowan. Yeah,
so,
Rowan. Yeah.
For those of you who might not know me, Melissa, you might not know this about me. I'm a massive bird nerd, like big time.
This is the book for you.
Oh my God. I'm saying, I was reading this, I was like, oh my God, it's like you got in my head and picked all my favorite parts and like made a book. Yeah, I mean, so she's got like this like sexy bird boyfriend, and then Melissa was like, oh, have you gotten to Jasper yet? And I was like, she's like, oh my God, just wait. And I was like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? So Jasper, the cool thing about these characters is their hair are feathers and they change, and Jasper has peacock feathers for hair, and it's amazing. I'm just imagining this beautifully flamboyant man who is just so incredible.
Because the thing about Jasper is that he's so physically flamboyant that like his standard warrior and like nicely fitted blue jeans, because he's like, you know what, I have all this natural beauty, I don't need the help with my wardrobe.
And it's everything about him. You've made his personality. He exudes that, you know. He's kind of this badass. He's kind of this smart aleck. He's wonderful. I love that character, and he made me laugh because, you know, I could see the boundaries and the walls he had up, but he was still he stayed true to who he was, and it's interesting to see him evolve too, because he gets pulled into this situation, you know, because Ivy's a thief, or not Ivy, Echo's a thief. The main character, well, I mean, I guess you're saying none of them are main, but like the main girl that we're kind of the human girl. And so that's how she knows him. And, you know, showing up at his door being like, hi, we're here, we're on the run, we need to hide, and you're going to have to deal with all this stuff was really interesting to kind of twist up his world and get him put in a little bit too. Was he one of your favorites to write? Did you have a particular character that you like really enjoyed? I mean, they're all very different.
I don't tell the others this, but Dorian and Jasper were probably my two favorites to write. Jasper didn't actually really exist in that way in the first draft. He was just kind of like this convenient plot fix. And then I started writing the scene where he and Dorian have their first conversation, and Jasper, you know, he sees himself as sort of apart from like this war that's going on. Like he's just like out for himself. He's like the Han Solo of the book.
Yeah, he kind of just does his own thing, like freelance troublemaker kind of. Yeah.
And he gets involved with the search for the Firebird, because imagine what it would do for his reputation if he's the thief who found the Firebird, you know? It's this legend, it's this fairy tale that people think, oh, that's not real, that's just a bedtime story, you know? People tell their kids, and he's like, but what if I found it, you know? So when he has this meeting with Dorian, who's theology about war and his enemies and the Avacyn, it's a very interesting meeting of minds, I think, because they're coming at this situation from two different perspectives. Dorian is with them because he's unfailingly loyal to Caius, and where Caius goes, he goes.
Yeah.
And Jasper's just in it for himself. So they're two very, very different people. So seeing how they interact with each other, I think.
And the fact that you propel them towards each other as characters too.
Did I propel them, or did they propel themselves? I
don't know. Aren't you the puppet master of this world? Aren't you?
I feel like I'm not. I didn't when I write books, I do like a short outline, just like a sort of beginning, middle, end. Here's where I'm going, and then I do like a chapter by chapter break before I get into the actual meat of the draft. And when I was drafting The Girl at Midnight, I didn't have the Dorian Jasper sort of romantic subplot planned. And then when I started writing their scene, I was just like, holy crap, Jasper wants him so bad. And it was just the kind of thing that sort of felt like it happened. I know I'm writing it and it's all me, but it kind of felt like it happened on its own.
The vessel, it's like coming in from the universe. And
and I just, because it's one thing to write down in your outline, oh, Dorian and Jasper have a conversation. And then when you start writing it, you're just like, oh, these are these two voices that I've been writing in other scenes, but now together, like something amazing is happening. And I just have to kind of run with that.
And it really is, because, they kind of change each other for the better as the story goes on. I mean, it's still kind of I don't want to say tenuous, like a hesitant relationship towards the end of the book. They're still kind of.
I mean, it is.
You know, but even things like them caring enough about each other to interact with enemy at the end in the fight scenes for each other, and just that level of like friendship that has formed in them caring about each other. It was really interesting. Yeah, I really loved that, and that's interesting too, hearing it from the reader's perspective, that the characters kind of took the story in their own direction, because it feels very natural, like you say, like once you put them together, it kind of makes sense. You're just like, oh yeah, these guys, this was bound to happen. It felt right to me. So talk to us a little bit about Caius and Echo, because while we're talking romance, there's this amazing kissing scene out. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
But it's so messed up. It's so messed up on so many levels.
It's so good. Okay, so for those how would you describe that? So I'm just going to let you, because I'm curious to hear how you describe that whole scene.
So Echo's been through something extremely traumatic. I won't say what, but she's not in a good place. And she's sort of lost at sea and grasping at any piece of driftwood that comes by to keep herself afloat. And Caius just happens to be in that scene for her, someone she's come to trust, if not someone she knows very well, but he was a sort of witness to this traumatic thing that happened to her. So she sort of latches onto him as this thing to help keep her afloat. And for Caius, he loved someone very deeply a very long time ago, and he lost her. And he hasn't really let himself get close to another person in that way since that loss. Yeah. So they're both really messed up people with really messed up views of relationships, and neither one of them is in a good place at that point. So when they kiss, it's not like really a happy romantic kiss. It's kind of a sad, desperate thing that happens between these two sad, desperate people.
It's wonderful though, like the tension, because it's almost like they're like pushing against it as they're leaning into each other. Like, you know, they're fighting it even though they're not fighting. It was really interesting to read because it was hot, but it was complicatedly hot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't just like, I love you, let's make out. You know, it was like,
yeah,
like
it wasn't, I didn't want it to feel like insta love.
Yeah.
And it was instant something, but it's definitely, like, I'm glad to hear you say that, because like I wanted that scene to have a sense of nuance and a sense of like, I like that this is happening, but I recognize it's probably not a healthy thing
like this is
for either of these people.
But again, that's life. That's reality. Yeah. Even though this guy has dragon scales on his face, and she's the thief for bird people, you know, that's. I mean, I would pretty much bet that most humans, if not all humans, who have dated have been in situations of should I do this, or why am I doing this, or I'm gonna shut my mind off and just, you know,
there's this great word. So Echo collects these esoteric, untranslatable words, and one of them in the book is akrasia, which is a Greek word that means acting against your better judgment. When you know that you're acting against your better judgment. And I think it's really relatable. We've all been in that situation where you're like, I shouldn't do the thing, but I'm going to do the thing.
Forget it. I'm going to do the thing. I don't care.
I recognize, and I feel like a lot of us have been there where you're like, I really shouldn't kiss the lead again.
Did I lose you?
No, you're still there. You kind of
all of a sudden it kind of caught up. I had it, like you were saying, we've all been in that situation. Like, I probably shouldn't kiss that guy, but I do. Essentially, yes. Yeah, I was really, you know, and of course they're in this interesting place, and there's like this culmination of emotions. It was really great. So the bad person in this book is really freaking awesome. I absolutely love her in the worst possible way. Oh my gosh, she is so crazy.
But she thinks that she's like, there's logic to her, you know, in what she does.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Even though they're fighting, they all think they're doing the right thing. You know what I mean? Like so we're talking about Caius' sister. She is this fire-wielding, amazing badass. That's the only way to describe her. But you're right. It's like she has that disconnect from emotion. She's just like, this is what needs to happen. This is how it needs to be. And we're going to make that happen.
And she is a product of the events that have sort of happened in her life, you know? Yeah. She's raised in a war. This war has been raging on for centuries before she was born. And she is, you know, sort of a cog in this machine.
Yeah. And it's, Mittens is paying us a visit here.
Hi, Mittens. Special guest, Mittens.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, Tanith she's kind of the extreme end of the spectrum and the kind of person that war creates. Like what you were saying about Dorian and Ivy before, it's when they have that scene in the dungeon, they're both acting against their natures. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what this horrible conflict is forcing people to do. There's a line in the book where Caius says, war makes monsters of us all. And that's sort of epitomized in the character of Tanith.
Yeah.
She's the sort of, like, cause she's not crazy. She's not mentally wrong with her. She just has a very extreme black and white view of the world.
And it's like you're saying, it's
she does to protect her people, but there's nothing that she won't do to protect them, you know? She doesn't bother weighing herself down with sort of ethical concerns. She's very much about getting the job done pragmatically, no matter who gets hurt along the way, as long as she accomplishes her goal, which is kind of a noble goal. I mean, she wants to protect her people. It's understandable, but she takes it to the very, very extreme. Yeah.
Of the other.
Yeah.
people, basically. The
And
other
at the
different
cost
races.
of her own humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's really it. It's like she's not, I don't want to say she's numb, because she has very visceral reactions, especially at the end of the book. Her emotions are very strong. Like, she's very much like, so there's like this big, so for those of you watching, who maybe haven't read the book, there's, part of the quest that we're on to find this Firebird, this magical item that will help end the war, or magical thing, whatever. We're still not kind of sure.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah, leads them to this oracle, and that's where like the climax of the book kind of happens, is around the oracle and outside of that area. And it was really interesting to kind of see how the emotions had slowly peaked towards that, especially for Tanith. Like, how when she gets there, I mean, she's not actively there until the climax happens, but the whole time she's been kind of moving that direction with them, which is really cool. I'm really curious, when you were kind of coming up with, like you were saying, the magic system, and you were basing it in reality, all of this, why dragons and birds? Is there a particular reason?
It started with birds. Like, this was years ago, so my memory of it's a little fuzzy. I started researching like firebird mythology. Like, it started with the firebird. I've always really loved that fairy tale. I used to do ballet, and the Firebird Ballet and Stravinsky's music was my favorite. So it's something that's I've lived with for a while. But when I started researching Firebird mythology, there are a lot of phoenix. The figure of the phoenix or the Firebird sort of exists in pretty much every culture worldwide, and a lot of it got intertwined with dragons at some part, because you've got a flying creature that's involved with fire, and so you could have a feathery Firebird, and then it's just kind of like, over the course of my research, these wires just crossed.
That's interesting too. It almost, I mean, I know this is completely off track, but in a way, that dragon, that Archaeopteryx, that very first bird that ever existed in our world, was like half reptile, half bird, and like literally like they kind of evolved from each other. That's really interesting. I love that about them, and it wasn't like a blatant like, I'm a human and then I'm going to turn into a dragon. And you're right, it was like, it's mixed up in who their identity is. They're like a blend, a beautiful blend. So it's really interesting. I really liked that aspect, and I thought it was well balanced. So do we want to talk about the end? The big, I mean, we're a little bit spoilery here. So do we want to?
We can.
As the author, we can. I mean,
extreme spoilers. Turn back now if you haven't read the book.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, you need to. This is a big deal. Like,
it's a really big deal.
You need to not continue. Anyways, but like, people who watch this are usually people who have read and are curious about more. So basically, Echo is the Firebird. She is the magical creature. Basically, she is it. And the sacrifice she has to make, she basically has to give herself up for the goodness of all. And that whole scene too, it was like, you were, as the author, you were jumping between a lot of interesting things right there. So it was like the story just kept moving forward. But knowing that her journey was going to take her there, and like the death and rebirth of the Phoenix kind of thing, were you, in the back of your mind, were you kind of wanting to plant those clues as you were going, like, or was it very much her in this whole other world and then that big shift? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I knew the ending of the book before I knew just about anything else, so I was definitely working towards that, but I didn't want to make it too obvious.
Oh, it was very surprising. Like, I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you hinted at it a little bit, because the character she was talking about that Caius was in love with before was basically like, everybody's like, there are people born into the option of being the Firebird, but they have to make that sacrifice, and she didn't want to. Rose chose not to, and now Caius is with the next one, essentially, and it was very interesting. So I was, there were inklings. But it didn't, until you planted those inklings, and it didn't occur to me. I just found that really interesting how, even though she's in this world, she is a human. She's a human in in a bird world, in a dragon world, and that's her life. But coming to be the most powerful tool to possibly end this fighting took on a whole different level for me for her as a character, because that's essentially where the book ends. Is like, we're on this journey, and now it's like, oh, here, blam, and then okay, bye. Like now we have to keep waiting. I'm really interested to see how you're going to progress her as a character in the future books. Is she still going to feel like the Echo we know?
Yeah, I mean, she is now sort of acting as a vessel for this cosmic force, but she's still herself. It's not like she was the Firebird since birth and it was only just unveiled, so she sort of welcomed this power into her. But dealing with that is going to be the focus of the Shadow Hour book 2. Be like powerless human girls surrounded by people, to still not being one of them. She's still othered in a way, just in a very, very different way.
And she's other, again, she's completely different from everybody else. Even though she now has magic, which she's like, oh, I'm like them. She's not. She's still set apart. Which is very interesting, because it's like she's become this incredibly important, powerful creature. But at the end of the day, there's still,
And they're still going for the Firebird, and now people know that it's her. So that hunt is still going on, but instead of being a participant of the hunt, she is now the goal of the hunt. She's the object of the hunt. So she's going to have to deal with people. Everyone wants a piece of that Firebird pie. So she has to deal with being hunted down and having to sort of live life on the run and come to terms with this power that she has now, and what she's meant to use that power for. Because if she's prophesied to end this war, sure, she has lots of power, but what is she going to use it for? Is she like an atomic bomb, where it's something that's so devastating that it stops the war because everyone's dead? Or is she meant to use it for a different purpose, maybe a higher purpose or a better purpose or a more peaceful purpose?
Which is interesting too, because her figuring out even just how to use the magic physically is an interesting dynamic, like how she kind of kicks butt at the end of the book, and just, you're right, like finding the nuances of that too. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I really like her as a character. I'm just saying, I'm very curious to see how that evolves. And it'll be neat to see kind of how you blend it all together. I feel like we've covered most of the broad strokes of the book. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we haven't touched on? We covered it pretty good.
I think we did. I think we covered a lot. You're a very good interviewer.
Oh, thank you. I like doing this. It's fun because
it is fun.
It's, why do we read if not to escape?
That's what I always say, and that's why I read fantasy, and that's why I write.
Me too. People, and I'm very sad to say this, but I have never read the Stephanie Perkins book, even though I know she's fantastic. I've never read a Rainbow Rowell book. I started like 2 John Green books.
Read Fangirl. Because it's about a girl like us who writes to escape.
Okay, well then that one's good. But people are like, why don't you? I'm like, because I'm a normal person. I want to be able to, I'm obsessed with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I want to bend air with my mind and my martial arts, and I want to fly, and I want to do all these things that we can't do, and that's why I just love this story, guys. I cannot stress enough that, if you like quest books, you took the words out of my mouth earlier, where you were specifically describing, it's not just magic, but it's in a world, this person is awakened to this world that's bigger than what they know. And like Harry Potter, and another example I do is like Percy Jackson. That's another good series like that. This is very much the same, in the sense where this human is kind of pulled into this other realm, and it's wonderful because at the end of the day you can kind of escape into that and see where it takes you. And so I loved it so much. I really did. I read it in one sitting, and I really loved this book, guys. So before we go, any books that you've read recently that you would recommend for people to check out? since you're a fantasy fan yourself?
Yes. You should read The Witch Hunter by Virginia. It takes place in an alternate universe version of England, where this girl, Elizabeth Grey, arrested, and it's sort of that event initiates her own quest to discover the truth about herself and the world she lives in. And another book you should definitely read is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Adia, and like it's a retelling of 1001 Nights, the story of Scheherazade.
Reviews about that book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And basically, this girl. The book starts with like this portrait of unbridled female rage, where Scheherazade is like, so this guy is killing his wives, you know, as the legend goes. I'm gonna go kill him because that's messed up. And she's just so determined, and like she puts herself in this situation that could be potentially fatal for her because she is so convinced that what she is doing is right. And it's kind of hard to argue with her logic and her rage. And I really liked that sort of imagining of a woman's rage taken to the extreme on her pursuit of justice.
That really sounds cool. All right, that sounds fantastic. All right, we talked about your writing too, and I thought that was interesting. I mean, this is kind of where when we come to the end, we just sort of, you know, like to touch on those broad things, but you've worked it in really well. So when can we expect book 2? Do you have a publishing date?
June 2016.
June 2016. So next summer, guys, because this book just came out. So, I mean, it's, you know, one a year, like you're saying. So you have to read it and wait. But, guys, it's so good. Like, the quest, it's got these amazing characters. There's good romance. There's good fantasy. There's elemental magic, which is always really fun. And it's fun when it's got a fresh vibe to it because it's a very common magical theme, and I really liked how it was handled in this book. So I would highly recommend it. Check it out. Check out Melissa's. You're on Twitter. You're on Facebook. You just check out your website. I'll put some links in the article to those too. And before I go, I want to talk about the June book, guys. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I know I did horror with Maplecroft back in February. I'm kind of going there again with Sweet by Emmy Laybourne. This book was ridiculously awesome and freaky as heck, and I loved every second of it, and it was a really quick read. I literally sat on my couch one evening and read it cover to cover in like a couple hours. It was great. So we're going to talk about that for the June book, and I hope you stop back for that interview. And Melissa, I just want to thank you for putting up with all the crap at the beginning and for chatting with us. And I just hope everyone picks this book up.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. This was so great. And I'm so glad you liked the book, and it's been so wonderful talking to you.
Okay. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next month. Okay, I'm going to stop the broadcast.